Hello, my name is Kara. I am a special education and elementary education student. Today I will be discussing information that can assist in understanding what special education is. First, I will start with a brief explanation that shows the changes seen throughout history regarding special education. Then I will discuss a couple of court cases that further demonstrates the progress seen for parental rights and special education rights. Lastly, I will suggest a few available resources that can further assist in understanding the educational rights of a child with disabilities and their parents' rights. Did you know the first education law in the United States was not passed until 1852? Well, it's true. This law was called a compulsory education law. This education law is the state-mandated law that places requirements on what age a child needs to attend school. Unfortunately, when each state created this education law, it did not include children with disabilities. Children with disabilities were educated by their parents or they were institutionalized. The beginning of special education programs was not until 1910, after the White House Conference on Children. The conference's primary focus was creating different programs available for children with disabilities. After the conference, children with disabilities were removed from isolated programs, like institutions, and placed into segregated public school classrooms. These classrooms were often funded by the children's parents. This form of schooling for children with special needs continued to increase from 1910 to 1930. Even with these changes seen in special education, it did not stop the exclusion of children with disabilities from public school education. Unfortunately, courts often supported the school's decision on the exclusion or the expulsion of children with disabilities. Due to these inconsistencies and the continuous exclusion, advocacy groups began to organize for real special education programs. In 1922, the Council for Exceptional Children was created by teachers, while parental advocacy movements started in 1933. By 1966, Congress passed grant programs to help the expansion and fund for special education programs, while the real changes were enacted in the 1970s. Special education continued to see changes in the 1970s, first with the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504. This act was enforced by the United States Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights. Under 504, students with disabilities were provided with appropriate education. That meant for the first time, students would receive services to meet their specific needs, finally at no cost to their parents. In 1975, Congress passed Education for the Handicapped, later renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. This act has seen changes in 1997 and in 2001. The idea is what sets the rules and laws that protects the educational rights of students with disabilities and their families. Unlike Section 504, IDEA is an education law, while Section 504 is a civil rights law. The first part of IDEA is providing children with free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. This means that the students are provided with free education with free services that will benefit them in their academic growth. These services are like speech therapy, occupational therapy, or small group assistance. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is also what sets the rules on creating an IEP. This is an individualized education program. This educational plan sets specific goals for the child to achieve and specific programs that need to be used in order to assist them in meeting those goals. The IDEA has many rules and regulations that must be met in order to maintain an IEP. That is things like parental consent, parental participation in the creation of the IEP, as well as the need to update this plan annually. If you would like more information on IDEA, there is a link in the description. Next, I will be discussing two court cases that reflect how the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act protected the rights given to children with disabilities and their families. Despite the progress the Rehabilitation Act, Section 504, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act has created in special education, history has shown that these two acts were not completely clear when they were first created. Due to this fact, there have been many monumental court cases brought against school districts by families believing their child's rights were being violated. These cases have helped create a better understanding on certain aspects relating to special education rights and parental rights protected by these laws. In the first case, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was still called the Education of the Handicapped Act, or EHA. This case was Polk versus Susquehanna Intermediate Unit in 1988. The court was to determine whether the student received free appropriate public education with his related services. Before this court case, it was unknown what length of progress the student should demonstrate in their related services. Congress did not specify in this original act. During this case, the court explained that with students who have severe disabilities, their IEP revolves more on their related services. That means physical, occupational, or speech therapy are the largest part of their educational services. The final decision made with the EHA in mind was that they believe free appropriate public education requires the child show notable learning progress and receive valid benefits through their programs. That means the progress shown cannot be minimal, it needs to be the maximum amount. This court case is considered a monumental court case as it ultimately changed the requirements for free appropriate public education and set a new standard for special needs services. Another example that demonstrates the parental and educational rights protected under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is seen in the case of Magyar versus Tucson Unified School District in 1997. During this case, the student had received a suspension that later turned into an expulsion from school, requiring him to miss 175 school days. During his expulsion, the student did not receive his educational services that were specified in his individualized education program. In court, the Tucson Unified School District argued that under their policy number 5061, the termination of educational services is permitted for children with disabilities if the student's misconduct was not due to their disabling condition. The court ultimately decided that the TUSD violated this student's rights as well as their parents' rights protected under the IDEA. This was due to many reasons. First, the school board should have created a new IEP once his suspension was extended past the 10 days, and offered alternative educational services that followed his IEP. An IEP is a legal documentation protecting the rights of the student's education. The final decision was that the district had 10 days to provide educational services to the student in accordance with this law. The court also made it known that TUSD's policy number 5061 actually violates the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I hope that with this brief insight on special education, I have been able to demonstrate to you even just some of the changes history has seen. Even with laws and regulations placed to protect your family and your student, it is important to know what you have access to. There are many resources available for families with children who have disabilities. They not only help you understand your rights or your child's rights, but can also provide you with some support. In Arizona, there is a resource called Raising Special Kids. The site provides information to help families understand how the legislature works. It aids in understanding funding as well as resources for education and assisting your child's transition to adulthood. I sincerely hope that this information that I've provided has helped you even just a little bit. If not, the links below will be there to help you as well.